by the military-industrial complex.
It could be seen to move violently forward, violently forward, violently forward.
I'm just a patsy. Let's win there.
I said this once or twice, but it bears repeating. If you like your current insurance, you will keep your current insurance.
You think about the Army and the Navy and the missions they run to protect the world, they run on SAC.
Well, you have done a really spectacular job. I guess pretty much everybody at this table is your customer, so that's not so bad.
Exactly.
I want to congratulate
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks you.
George, I have one question for you.
What's that?
Did you bring sunscreen?
No, I never use sunscreen. But I heard at Rand Beach here in Santa Monica, you didn't need sunscreen, but maybe that's just a rumor.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the guys at Rand use the beach as much as they use Marina del Rey. They had that boat down there, the Dreamer. It was a trimaran that they used to go out sailing on, I think.
And then Bissell had the Sea Witch, and I can't remember where it was, somewhere in New York, Watertown or something. I can't remember. The 54-footer.
Well, you're also, I think Santa Monica Pier was the right around there. Venice Beach, it might have been the Venice Pier. I apologize. It's one pier down. So directly behind George, you go past that pier, and then the next pier is the Venice Pier, which was, I think, the climax of the movie Falling Down, which has gotten some kind of a popular remit on the interwebs in the last week or so.
Well, Ivan Raiklin's job as a psychological officer is to get people to do stupid emotional things rather than using their cognitive higher order processes. And that was the subject of my space this morning. And I had one, Peter Duke, grace us with his presence this morning.
Right, and I didn't mean to kind of pwn you there, George, by jumping in on my wife's account, but I was busy making breakfast and she was listening to you. And then I said, I have something to say to George. Can you just hit the button? And she did. So there it is.
Well, there it is. The hours in citizen journalism are long, and the pay is horrible. But you do have to get along with your boss as well. But at least I can do it at the beach, every once in a while. So this is our first Baywatch version. And actually, I saw 2 lifeguards, a male and a female, here a minute ago. And I thought of Reeve Whitson creating a little Baywatch of his own in the 60s.
Who is Reed Whitson?
Reeve Whitson is a CIA guy, and I have done 5 dramatic vignettes of the life of the CIA officer who's working with the Rand Corporation. He's working with this guy named Dr. Herman. They're working on this sort of early minority report supercomputer program. There's this supercomputer that they're developing. It's a LARC, L-A-R-C thing with some of the nuclear labs from the Manhattan Project, Lawrence Livermore, Berkeley, that sort of thing. And they're working with the CIA chaos program. They're working with this FBI COINTELPRO, and they're working with the counterintelligence people in Vietnam, the Phoenix program. This guy is a big Phoenix program guy. This Dr. Herman. So my thesis is they're trying to create a helter-skelter here to basically scramble everybody's brains in these rich hills over by where you live.
Yeah, if I walked out directly in front of my house, I could see where George is. Yeah, right there. Yeah, it might be a little foggy up by me. Although if I look outside, I can see shadows. So I think the sun is out here.
But the basic idea here is that the people right over my shoulder, Rand, were good at wargaming for the whole Peter Duke intro. You see the nuclear weapons, you see the rockets, you see all the overwhelming rocket attack, all the things that were part of the Strategic Air Command. And the guy who founds it is LeMay, Curtis LeMay. He's lampooned in Dr. Strangelove. He's the closest personal friend of Reeve Whitson, the CIA officer. Reeve Whitson also knows all the Nazis, and his go-between is the Scorzani, the military assassination guy. So are they trying to set up sort of an assassination program here with the LAPD? Turns out they did. It's called SIS, Special Investigative Services, but it's basically a kind of a Phoenix program in LA with a tan. Phoenix program with a tan.
Well, Phoenix program with a tan. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a few things there. One of them was, and for people who have concerns about our audio, George is on his headphones. I've turned down my mic a little bit, but if you've got an issue, let us know in the chat whether or not you think I'm too loud or whatever. Yeah, you were talking about Rand and game theory, and one of the theses that I've been working on lately is the whole idea that that Rand's reports that they come out with are really just cover stories. They're kind of theater, and that's why I named the show today the Los Angeles Storytelling Complex, or the I can't remember what the name of the show is now. Storytelling Industrial Complex, because it's all storytelling. Like I look at Rand and I wonder whether or not there's much difference between Rand and Paramount Studios, because what they're doing is they're putting out reports that wind up becoming the justifications for the things that the Pentagon is doing, because people who have got abbreviations before and after their names are writing these very technical sounding white papers. And it's funny, I'm reading a book right now. I was listening to Farrell. I published a story on my Substack. On my Buy Me a Coffee. And I will make it the lead story on the Duke Report. I haven't gotten around to it. But I was listening to Farrell, and Farrell was talking about how when the Soviet Union collapsed, that the Russian Orthodox Church got involved with the military and basically became partners with the military in order to control those nuclear weapons that you've talked about, at length on this show with the megatons to megawatts program. And And that's a story that I've never heard before. But jumping back to the mutually assured destruction hypothesis put out by Herman Kahn at the Hudson Institute, that I think Herman Kahn started off with Rand, and then he hung up his own shingle at the Hudson Institute. Is the whole idea that if you don't actually really have nuclear weapons, but you create a story that not only do we have nuclear weapons, but we have enough nuclear weapons to destroy life on the planet, for every human being and animal and all life forms on the planet. Basically, we can end life on the planet with the nuclear weapons that we possess. That what would be a better way of funneling virtually unlimited amounts of money into the military of not only the United States, but every other Western country and the Soviet Union, for the militaries of those countries, to basically do whatever they want, to create special programs in Los Angeles, to do all kinds of other stuff under the guise of nuclear weapons, under the guise of keeping us safe for peace, and to make sure that you've got those people, that you've got the public as afraid as you need them to be. You make sure that all of the kids who are going to school are hiding under their desk and kissing their asses goodbye. And then you put out movies like Dr. Strangelove. You use your operators like Stanley Kubrick, as is hypothesized by Jason Horsley in his book, The Kubrick Con, which I highly recommend, to create a comedy, right? A comedy about how nuclear annihilation is just a hair trigger away, and any kind of madman at a strategic air command base could destroy all of the life on the planet. You have Kurt Vonnegut writing a book like Cat's Cradle, where there's a destructive weapon called Ice 9. It's actually just a piece of ice. It's in a test tube. And the difference between Ice 9 and regular H2O is that it has a melting point of 120 degrees. And so if you take a small piece of Ice 9 and you drop it into the ocean, it turns the entire ocean into Ice 9. And in fact, it turns every river and swamp that are feeding into the ocean into Ice 9. So like a nuclear weapon, Ice 9 destroys all of the life on the planet. And oh yeah, by the way, Ice 9 kind of sounds like Einstein. It's kind of like, so you've got that thing going there. And so you've got all of these different psychological operations going on, and they all start with somebody sitting in front of a typewriter and a white piece of paper going clack, 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 clack. And then it turns into millions of dollars of deal flow, okay, and or billions or trillions of dollars in deal flow. And in essence, what you've done is that you've used words on white paper in order to psychologically program the entire planet, and to transfer huge amounts of wealth from scared taxpayers into the coffers of these black operations.
Yeah, and if you think about it, how closely the Strategic Air Command was they take over the program in the Air Force, and they design a thing where they say the bombers are going to be in the air all the time. And Curtis LeMay is the one running that. And that comes from another Rand position paper, strategic paper, that said a sneak attack could be 95% effective if one side does first strike. So the Rand paper that was the reply to that was, well, if we always had bombers in the air, we could always have a retaliatory strike for mutual assured destruction. The same thing was the rationale for the nuclear submarine, the triad. They call it the nuclear triad.
Right.
So all of these things, the missile gap, all of these things that are lampooned in Dr. Strangelove, all come from the Rand Corporation. And even now, Elon Musk is saying very, 2001 Space Odyssey type things. He says, I spend half my time thinking about how to make life better for the human race, And I spend the other half of my time thinking about how to make us an interplanetary race. Doesn't that sound like it could have come from the mouth of Wernher von Braun? Von Braun had those kind of dreams of extraterrestrial life and interplanetary life. And it's what's driving, I still look at it, it's what's driving the mission to Mars. And
well, is it? I mean, I posted on Twitter last week, and I talked about it. The Ethical Skeptic's very compelling article using great rhetorical skill. His thesis that the poles of the globe, which we've all been told switch every 100,000 years or so. I don't know that's true. I know that I learned that. I know that science teachers in school told me that. I know that I've read articles that say that that happens. I know that there's supposedly compelling ice core evidence of that happening. So all of these things are, I've been told by people who supposedly know what they're talking about, but I don't have any direct experience of understanding whether or not that is true. So Ethical Skeptic has posted that there is going to be a pole shift of 104 degrees along the 31st parallel, which is 8 degrees offset from the Great Pyramids, which will put the North Pole in the middle of, fancy enough, Rhodesia. So, Cecil Rhodes. So it basically moves the North Pole up to Rhodesia and the whole globe switches over. And if that happens, George will either be under 800 feet of water or he'll be in the middle of a desert like the Sahara. I'm not exactly sure which way it'll go during the pole switch, right? The water may just suck out George for 1,000 miles and not come back.
Yeah, and I think this is a subtle form of helter-skelter storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Again, positioned at elites who have a lot of money. I know somebody who's involved in this, who became extremely wealthy. He's an extremely smart young man. He became extremely wealthy at a very young age by buying Bitcoin. And he has more money than God, and only joking, but he has a lot of money. And he's planning for the pole shift. Because that's how elites think. They don't think I'm going to, and he's not even thinking of himself as elite, but he has a lot of money. Where would be the safest place? It would be the mountains, as you just said. It would be safe from flooding. It would be a gradual shift happening over time. Let's say 10 days, maybe 20 days, etc. So being in the middle of the earth, the middle of the United States would be the safest place. Being on the Continental Divide would be the safest place. So there's this group in Colorado, sort of a survival group, that is preparing for this. But again,
you've got Elon Musk with the Boring Company and SpaceX. You have Jeff Bezos, who supposedly, there's another channel that tells similar stories to Ethical Skeptic called Suspicious Observer, I think, or Suspicious Observers. And I think the O is spelled with a 0 if you're looking for it. And he does a daily report. And this guy is an ex-attorney. He's an excellent rhetorician, And again, I've been studying linguistics for about 4 years now, and so I'm hyper vigilant now about how good people are about making their arguments. Somebody sent me a great email the other day telling me that they thought I was a great thinker and that my ability to speak, though, isn't very good. And I agree. I agreed with them. That should give everybody who watches this channel, though, a level of comfort that I'm not a great rhetorician like Tucker Carlson. I and ah a lot. So in any case. On Suspicious Observers, he claims that the Earth and the solar system, because we're part of a galaxy and we're spinning around, that every 112,800 years or something, we go through some kind of like big wave sheet of a galactic proportion, and then that causes all kinds of disruptions in the planet that causes the pole shift. And his thesis is that Jeff Bezos, he's got his Blue Origin in New Mexico, but within 12 miles or so from the Blue Origin site, Jeff Bezos is also digging a deep underground bunker in the mountains of New Mexico. So this is these are things that are going out there. There was one other one that I'm trying to think of. I don't remember what it is because some Victory Gin said, I don't agree, Peter. Don't agree with what? And so
I'm sure that you're a wonderful elocutionist. I'm sure that's what.
I see. Yeah.
But my point here is this is just a more ridiculous form of the pole shift that you have to create by saying all hippies are murderers and roving bands of murderers. You have to create this sense that all these people that are like getting taking peyote
all these people who are protesting against the Vietnam War,
right, are all going to murder you tonight in your sleep and your children. And that's a pole shift. And my point I make in front of the Rand Corporation today is, if you look at how they did it with Helter Skelter, right? Let's just say that it was state sponsored, not Rand necessarily, but somebody state sponsored. It's only like 5 people. Or you would normally have to do that kind of pole shift in thinking, you might have to have a whole revolution that lasts for 20 years, right? With millions of people dead. And then
I was 12 or 13 years old. I lived in Woodland Hills, which from my house, again, you could see the Santa Susana rocket tests. It wasn't the first, Woodland Hills is over that mountain there, but from my house, you could see the Santa Susana rocket tests. They weren't the Saturn V booster rockets. They were the second stage rockets. So they were the J5s, not the J1s. I can't remember what it was. But between me and the Santa Susana test range was Chatsworth, and that's where Spawn Ranch was. And there was a straight line down Topanga Canyon Boulevard to Ventura Boulevard, or the Ventura Freeway, which took you to Laurel Canyon, which took you to the scene of the Manson family murders. And it's so interesting. It wasn't called the Tex Watson murders. It was, it wasn't called the Tate murders. It wasn't called the Polanski murders. It was called the Manson murders. And Charles Manson wasn't even there when it happened.
Yeah, you could see this is the idea of a cult leader. They're bringing on the idea of a cult, and about how these hippies are under the control of these wicked, evil cult leaders, and they're doing all these satanic rituals. And you don't think that because you see all the pretty girls in the cult, and they're going through the trash at the Ralph's or the Albertsons, which I think was theatrics. But anyway, all those. And
there were lots of stories about how they were always having orgies. There were lots of orgy stories.
Right. So it's free love and it's all that. And so no problem, right? Most people are like, oh, well, the hippies sound like kind of fun. I could go learn how to play the sitar, the Beatles and all this. Well, now it changed to, no, they're actually under mind control. They're under mind control drugs. They're all being raped against their will. This guy is going to make your daughter go kill somebody in the middle of the night. That happened overnight. Now think of how long it would take. Let's say if the Rand Corporation or a think tank hadn't gotten involved and they said, well, here's what you got to do. You got to set up all of these SIS units that are counterintelligence units in all the police departments. And you got to go out and identify all of the leaders. And then you've got to disrupt their lives. And then you maybe have to kill them by dropping fentanyl in their ear. So you're going to need about, 1 million agents. And blah, blah, blah. It's going to take about 10 years to stop this anti-war thing. And the Rand Corporation or somebody like them says, hey, I got to do this, just terror. If we had the idea of terror, where everyone will be afraid of the hippies the next day, the movement will die overnight, and it almost did. And they got their SIS teams.
Well, I have a slightly different take on it, and that comes from Annie Jacobson's story about one of the first Rand contracts, where Rand sent sociologists to interrogate prisoners that were being held in the Phoenix program. Now, Annie Jacobson never mentions the Phoenix program in her book, but they went and they interviewed people that were being held in these Phoenix detention centers, fusion centers. I think that she did call them fusion centers, which
That's
again,
what they are in the United States.
it's what they are in the United States now. They're called fusion centers. Thank you, Reinhard Gehlen, for the fusion centers. And so they came back, these two Rand sociologists, they went and they spent some time in Vietnam, and they came back and they wrote up their findings and they delivered their paper to the Pentagon. And what Rand said to the Pentagon is that there's no way that we can win the war in Vietnam, because the Vietnamese who are fighting the war don't actually even know what a communist is. They think that they're fighting for liberty and freedom, and they quote people like Thomas Jefferson. And we don't believe that you can defeat a group of people who believe that they are fighting for their own liberty and freedom. And the Pentagon's response was to give Rand a new contract, and their mission on the new contract is to figure out why the original sociologists who went over there and interviewed those prisoners thought that what the prisoners were telling them was the truth. So
Sure.
right, and
Keep going until you get the answer you want.
right. So yeah. So that story just tells me that Rand will continue taking purchase orders from the Pentagon until they come up with the stories that the Pentagon wants to hear. And in that scenario, that makes Rand a storytelling outfit. That makes Rand not much different from the story department at Paramount, or the story department at MGM, or the story department at Fox. They've got writers in there, and they're making things up, and they're taking them to the studio executives, and they're trying to see what flies.
Yeah, and I would say all these things in our history, like let's say the Bay of Pigs or whatever, they all were processed and wargamed through Rand, right? And Rand came up with a plan that said, well, Castro's got 200,000 irregulars and 30,000 regulars, or maybe it's 60. So we need a group at least that big, right? And an invasion force and a simultaneous invasion at all their ports, north and south, plus coordinated attacks on taking out the Air Force and all their Marine barracks, their barracks, destroy all the roads, the whole thing. Somehow that gets watered down to Bissell giving Kennedy the plan of 800 guys, and they might have got to 1,400 at one point, and no airstrikes. They do one little tiny airstrike, and so forth. They know they can pull the plug, and they know it'll probably fail. The Rand Corporation has already wargamed the hell out of this thing and said there's no way. You don't have to be, work for Price Waterhouse to say you're going to try to take over 250,000 person army with 1,400 guys. That's not going to work. And I realized the whole strategy was to try to get the people to uprise and everything, but everything about it, like you say, had been wargamed. And they said that people are, he had popular support. So Kennedy they could use these war plans. My point is also to sink a president, just like they sunk Eisenhower with the U-2. Bissell sunk Eisenhower with the U-2, and he sunk Kennedy with Bay of Pigs.
Yeah, and I know that you're using Rand kind of generically. Again, my high school algebra tutor was a Rand mathematician. My next door neighbor was a Rand mathematician. My mother was a librarian. My mother and aunt were both librarians at Rand. I know a lot of good people, from the Rand Corporation. That said, Herman Kahn was with Rand, and then he left and he started the Hudson Institute. So I think it's just as if you're trying to rustle the bushes and trying to figure out agency for a lot of the programs that you're talking about, I don't think it's just a West Coast thing. I do think that the Hudson Institute was coming up with a lot of these things. Yeah, and it wasn't all Rand.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely positive that LeMay was in the room saying airstrike in Bad Pigs, and he was one of the founders of RAND. So in that case, yes. But other cases, it could have come from anywhere, the Hudson Institute or.
Well, was LeMay really a founder of RAND, or was he just signing the purchase orders because he was in the Air Force at that time?
Yeah, well, they say he is, but I don't. Douglas, the guy who started Douglas Aircraft over at the airport right behind me.
Right.
He was supposedly in there, and I can't remember the other guys. But anyway, I think Hap Arnold, who ran the Air Force, was.
Have you gone over to the museum there at Santa Monica
yeah.
Airport, George? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the room is still the way Douglas had it. They took the old Douglas aircraft boardroom and basically built a museum on top of it, and that's where they had a lot of their meetings and so forth. So, but the idea in Air Force is different than normal war planning, which is terrestrial forces, and it was new. And if you think about an overwhelming attack with planes, an overwhelming attack with missiles is sort of the same kind of problem, right? All the beach defenses and all the things you've worked out in war game before this, naval games, are off the board, and now you're the new expert with attacks from the air and everything. I agree with you. 99% of the RAND Corporation projects now are world hunger and.
Well, they're very woke. I encourage everybody who watches this channel to subscribe to the RAND Review, which is a free quarterly newsletter that they put out, because you can see what their public perception program is by taking a look at that. But I wanted to bring this back to the storytelling industrial complex because my thesis. For the show today is that human beings are more controlled by stories than any other technology, and that the technology of Hollywood. I was talking to you earlier today about. I sent you a link that maybe we can tweet out to a movie that I watched last night that I've watched before. That's called The Wrecking Crew. I'm sure Rick Olson, who's watching, is very familiar with The Wrecking Crew. But what a lot of people don't realize is that many, if not most, of the hit songs that came out of all of the different bands from the 1960s were all the same musicians. They were the people who were standing in front with the microphones, who had their pictures on the record albums, were different people. But the people playing the music in the background and giving you the hooks and the melodies and the musically addictive components of those music, they were all the same people. They were called the Wrecking Crew. And the reason they were called the Wrecking Crew is because they came in with rock and roll, and they used to wear blue jeans and T-shirts into their recording sessions. And the old school studio musicians used to come in with a shirt and tie, a jacket and tie on, and they were very proper. And so these guys came in and wrecked the studio musician business for them. And what makes that movie particularly interesting at this point is that we talk about how everything is quote unquote fake on this show, how politics is fake. Imagine if you're watching the Wrecking Crew movie and you're thinking, well, instead of creating a hit album, we want to create a hit politician, right? We want to create a person on the left and a person on the right who we're going to run for office. But at the end of the day, either one of them will move in the direction that we want them to move in. And so when you start to see the machinations, and they've got an interview with Peter Tork, who was who famously played for the Monkees, and he talks about how he showed up for a recording session and he brought his guitar, and none of that was required. In fact, the music was already done, and the only thing that they needed from him was his vocals. He was incredibly upset because he had gotten this job thinking, oh, I'm going to be on TV and I'm going to get to be a musician, and because he really was a musician. And he didn't get to actually be a musician. And in fact, the Monkees, Peter Tork, I think, and Mike Nesmith were the only two guys who actually knew how to play instruments. And they didn't mention it in the movie, but I think famously, when the Monkees finally did manage to do a concert, it was at the Hollywood Bowl, and the act that opened for the Monkees at the Hollywood Bowl was who, George?
That I don't know.
Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, there you go.
Jimi Hendrix opened for the Monkees, who didn't know how to play their instruments. So there's the rub.
Well, yeah, and he played upside down, and so did Kurt Cobain. So you never know. But anyway, I think think about it this way as a wargaming problem. How do I give out 1 million free hits of LSD? Should I have
that you bought from Sandoz because you didn't want the Soviets to have them?
Right. So how do I get 1 million hits given out and the kids to take them? Through, if I put army generals on every corner saying, I'm trying to debilitate you with some bazooka bubble gum and some LSD, here, take this, anti-war protester? Or what if I created a whole bunch of bands and had the bands throw the LSD into the crowd?
Right.
And the ones that overdosed were grateful if they died. Hey, I got a great idea. Let's call it the Grateful Dead.
Because the first days are the hardest days. Don't you worry anymore, because when life looks like Easy Street, there is danger at your door. You're muted, George.
That means you're getting free LSD, and this happened not only at Grateful Dead concerts, but Rolling Stone concerts, Byrds concerts, Buffalo Springfield, Eagles concerts, etc. I can't remember the guy's name right now, but they were filming it all, and this was how they were going to pollute the anti-war movement with sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it's literally sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
And it sort of worked.
It did work. There's a lot of record companies here still in Santa Monica, Arista, a couple of different ones I called on.
Actually, they all moved to Santa Monica. So yeah. Universal Music Group is there. What do you call it?
Epic, Arista, Capitol is up in Thousand. I mean, it was in Hollywood, but it moved up to, I think, Thousand Oaks or something like that. But you get the idea. Is hey.
Interscope. Interscope is yeah. They're all right there on Colorado by the DMV.
Right, and here is the band. Right there is where the internet was born. Right, that big tall building.
Actually, that's One Wilshire, and that's a node. It's behind you. Wait, let me see. No, keep going 180 degrees to the right.
This way?
No, the other way. On the other side of the pier.
Oh,
Okay,
over there? That's even closer. That's even closer to the Rand Corporation.
Okay, so over there is Marina Tower 1. And in Marina Tower 1, there's two things in Marina Tower 1. In Marina Tower 1 is DNS Server 1. So there are what they call node DNS servers on the internet. The DNS Server 1 is in the Marina Tower in Marina Del Rey. And in the same building is the Institute for Creative Technology, which is a joint venture between USC Film School and the Pentagon. And it is an institute. I think it's ICT. I should find a link. I'm sure they have a website. And I actually did a contract job for some people from ICT at one point. I worked on basically a video game. Okay, this is a video. Get this. So this is so ICT spun out. ICT was coming up with ideas for the Pentagon, but ICT didn't have the fab facilities. They didn't have the ability to actually build the things that ICT. So ICT was kind of like a cross between Rand and Disney Imagineering. So you had Disney Imagineer style people, okay, working with RAND-style people. So during the war in Afghanistan, there were a lot of soldiers that were getting blown up by IEDs. And so ICT came up with this idea that they needed to create a simulator for soldiers that they could put soldiers in so that they could be prepared in case they got blown up by an IED if they were driving a Humvee. So ICT didn't have the ability to build it, so it got contracted out to a company called RL Leaders. And I was a subcontractor to RL Leaders. They hired me as a photographer. And RL Leaders built this. It was really cool. It was a really cool thing. It was basically a Humvee on a motion base. So we've all been on the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. And Indiana Jones was built by a guy that I used to work for named John Snoddy. And the innovation of the Indiana Jones ride is that you had the roller coaster trolley, and then you had the part that you sat in. But in between the roller coaster trolley and the thing that you sat in was what they call a motion base, meaning it was the kind of thing that they put in simulators. So if you're flying a 767 and you have to go and you have to do your simulator time every 6 months or every year to get your checkup, then you're in this thing that's on a motion base. So RL Leaders built this Humvee on a motion base that was surrounded 360 degrees with HD video screens. And so the soldiers could drive this thing around on the motion base, and it had flashbangs, and it had so you would be driving around in Afghanistan. You thought you were driving around in Afghanistan, and if you hit an IED, the vehicle would pitch over on it. There would be explosions and smoke, and it would pitch over on its side. And it was so dangerous that if you weren't wearing your seatbelt and if you weren't wearing a helmet, it would kill you. Like this ride would kill you because it would pitch you over so fast. So those things do exist. So that is also in that building, one Marina Tower, which is over there. Yeah. You might see the top of it, that white building, I might be, no, that's the roller coaster. It's beyond there. If you go in that direction down, it's between Lincoln and I think Via Marina. You're muted.
Well, I think that shows you how close these things cluster together. You know, the internet nodes and the wargaming, advanced simulation, just the whole idea of if you're going to model nuclear war, which is probably never going to happen, and if you're going to model biological war, which is probably not going to happen very often unless it's live exercise, and let's hope there's a journalism group that will call it out live, you know, that this is a live exercise. Hopefully there'll be a journalism group that does that. But most of the warfare that happens on a daily basis is low intensity warfare, right?
Right.
It's low intensity. It's disturbing people's lives. It's offering attractive models to break up their marriage. It's offering drugs to their kids. It's going to their boss and saying there's something horrible that you don't know about this guy, right? That's every day. Now, how are you going to model that? And so that's the guy we follow at the Phoenix program guy that we follow named Herman, William W. Herman, Herrmann.
Well, I mean, I think the way that you model it, though, George, is you know, the other thing that we were thinking of, that we were speaking of, I'm trying to do three things at the same time here. I'll take this Julie Smith comment off. I found this Rand Hymn song that she's talking about. I don't know if we'll get a copyright strike on the Rand Hymn song. I'm willing to risk it. What do you think, George?
Let's shoot the moon. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Share screen.
Great researcher, by the way. Thank you for all your research.
All right, here we go.
The Rand Corporation's the boon of the world. They think all day long for a fee. They sit and play games about going up in flames. For counters they use you and me, honeybee. For counters they use you and me. It's so nice to know we have Rand on our side. We'll always have good old Rand around. A zillion will be fried out, but in some neat hideout, Rand will be safe underground, praise the Lord. Rand will be safe underground. With the stroke of a pen, they can change us from men to numbers that flash on the wall. These brainy heroes transform us to zeros, so who gives a damn if we fall after all? Who gives a damn if we fall? Their superior genes will be safe behind screens, with the rest of our line doomed to die. They'll be all sorted out, past a shadow of doubt, by the all-wise electronic eye. Bow down to the mighty electronic eye. They will rescue us all from a fate worse than death, with a touch of the push-button hand. We'll be saved at one blow from the designated foe. But who's going to save us from Rand, dear Lord? Who's going to save us from Rand?
Hey, that's really good. Excellent.
George, did I see a tear? Are you getting another tear in your eye there?
No, I'm laughing. Who's gonna save us from Rand? That's good. I love her. She's obviously a lyricist, so they're very funny lyricist.
Right. Well, but the other interesting thing about Los Angeles is that you were talking about on your show is that the Frankfurt School, which started out as a reaction to the failure, the assumed failure of the Russian Revolution to become a global Marxist revolution, was started in Frankfurt. And moved from Frankfurt University to Columbia University, and then when World War II started, moved from Columbia University to the Pacific Palisades, which is you're facing right now. And Theodore Adorno lived off of Kenter, and Max Horkheimer lived up in the Riviera, up by where Ben Affleck and Matt Damon live, and right there. And Edward Marcuse lived a little bit closer, I think in Santa Monica Canyon, which is right behind you also. And they came up with this thing called critical theory. And the idea of critical theory was that the reason that the Marxist revolution, which is based on a concept of separating the haves from the have-nots, was based on economics. So it was rich people versus poor people, right? It was the aristocracy versus the peasants, right? And what Horkheimer and Adorno figured out, and Marcuse, and a couple of other guys, was that the reason that it only affected Russia was because it only affected places where there was not a middle class. Because if you had a well-established middle class, the middle class people were going, well, we've got a chicken in our pot. We have a car in our garage. We
have a barbecue.
We have a barbecue, right? Curtis Yarvin's thesis that Americans will never revolt as long as they can grill. So the reason that I post my No Revolution Tonight Twitter's posts on the Peter Duke Photo Twitter thread is because I figure as long as I can continue to barbecue, there will not be a revolution. That Americans will not get up and they will not change anything. And the night that I go out to my barbecue and I have no charcoal and I have no steaks and I have nothing that I can put on my grill, I don't have a hot dog, okay, then maybe we're close. Maybe we're close.
I think Rand has a 24-hour live cam on your grill to be as the best predictor of revolution
Well, they don't need it because I'm broadcasting it for them. I'm giving them a status report.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Look at the attack on the meat and everything, H5N1. Going after the meat. So who knows? But you were making another point about Adorno and this whole group, Thomas Mann and Bertolt Brecht and Marcuse.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Adorno. One of the things I think I have to go check my notes, but I think one of the things that Adorno was saying is that if you take messages and you combine them with music, then you can move those messages into the psyche of people. And so when you start to look at the Wrecking Crew movie and you start to think about it as a military program, one of the post-World War II German leftist, German Marxist ideologies came out of the Frankfurt School, came out of Adorno and Horkheimer in the Pacific Palisades, was this idea of subversion, creating subversive media, and it was aimed directly at the culture of the United States of America. So John Adams famously said that that the Constitution would not work for a country that was not religious or moral. That is that the Constitution of the United States is only going to work for a country that is religious or moral, and that by separating church from state, you are in a gray area, right? Because morality is historically controlled by people's religious beliefs. So the idea of subversive cinema, which started out with film noir immediately after World War II, is that you started to take themes that were consistent in American movies. So in American movies before World War II, classically, there were good guys and bad guys. This is something that Leo Strauss at the University of Chicago talked a lot about. You had good guys and bad guys. Well, after World War II, what started to happen is that they started to reverse the roles of good guys and bad guys. You had Jane. Well, immediately after World War II, you had the noir films where you would have a good gangster and a bad cop, right? But then classically, like in the 60s and the 70s, you started to have Bonnie and Clyde, where what's his name?
Warren Beatty.
Warren Beatty and who's the mole?
Faye Dunaway.
Faye Dunaway, right. So these very sexy and attractive people were being who robbed banks and killed people with machine guns. And again, I'm not saying they didn't have good reason, but turn them into very attractive and sexy characters, right? And is it a coincidence, George, that you get Bonnie and Clyde movies coming out? You get Straw Dogs and Reservoir Dogs and all these Reservoir Dogs. Straw Dogs. Wait, no. What was the one with Dustin Hoffman where he robs a bank and he takes hostages? Dog Day Afternoon. Dog Day Afternoon. Yeah. Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Dog Day Afternoon, right? Where you've got a guy who's a bank robber, he's holding a bunch of people hostage, but it turns out to be a very sympathetic character. They paint him as a very sympathetic character. And so you get a lot of these stories about criminals who you have a lot of empathy for, okay? Well, that's subversive, because if the culture is the values and the processes of a society, right, then what you do, if you start to create hero worship for people who are doing bad things, then what you're slowly starting to do is to erode the fabric of that society. You're starting to kind of like wreck it a little bit. And so the big turning point for Marxism in the United States of America was the understanding that was born in the Pacific Palisades, okay, of taking what was good and representing it as something that's bad. And what we moved from an economic frame where It was rich people. It was the aristocracy versus the peasants. To racism was the next one. So if you were a white person, you were a racist. You were bad. And the ultimate extension of that is critical race theory. But the subtext for the story today was critical journalism theory, because you can take that same context, that same idea of the have and the have not. So in the case of journalism, there are some people who claim to have a monopoly on truth. And what they will do is that they will assign the moniker conspiracy theorist to somebody who's telling the truth, who's not telling the same truth that they're telling. But it's exactly like calling somebody who's white, saying that they've got systemic racism because of their skin color. It's like, oh, if you're finding out facts about a news story and you're letting people know in real time that these things are not true, then there must be something wrong with you. And this is like applying critical theory. You can apply it to journalism. You can apply it to race. You can apply it to sports. You can apply it to whatever. I would say Title IX is probably critical sports theory, right? Which is all being undone by critical gender theory. So they start to bump into each other. I worked on this thing called the Las Vegas Springs Preserve, and I was working with one of these sustainability guys, and he was telling me that the arguments that the diaper people got into were really funny, because there was one group of people who said that disposable diapers were unsustainable because disposable diapers are made out of petrochemicals. But there were other people who said that the washable diapers were unsustainable because the amount of power that was required to wash poopy diapers was more than the amount of power that it took to create and bury a disposable diaper. This was actually an argument that this guy heard at the UN.
Well, I changed so many diapers, Peter. Survivability is also a factor. If the parent dies, so that's where disposable diapers had an advantage. But the have-not, creating the have-not, and like critical race theory, white privilege and all that's very important, because it's a shift off of the economic differences, and you can't do anything about your race. You know what I mean? And I think that was a key insight that you delivered today on our space, and this is the subject of your book. And
well, it's a topic in my book, yeah.
Well, it's happening over and over again, and where you have these guys that are 6'4" and 240 and 16-inch biceps that make the sex change, and now they're choking out girls in the state championship.
Well, you don't even need to make the sex change. All you need to do is declare. I had an idea when my daughter was going to Pali High that we should pitch. I pitched the principal on it. She was kind of spineless. She liked the idea, but she didn't want to be responsible for presenting it to the board of directors of the school. I suggested that the entire men's varsity team at Palisades High School identify as women and destroy every other women's basketball team that year, and turn it into a reality TV series. And the mascot of the Palisades High School is the Dolphins. So my pitch document was called The Mighty Dolphins.
I like it.
And she said, "Well, if you can convince the board of directors of the school to do this, then I'll support you."
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
LeMay thought the drug thing, and this goes back to making the hippies the they group and we're the we group. He thought that Russians, or at least he said this, he thought Russians were behind all these bans, and that Russians were financing all the LSD, and they were trying to make sure the whole youth.
Who said that?
LeMay. LeMay believed that. So, so it, you know, there was various camps that, you know, he thought that same thing was with Black Panthers, and he was George Wallace's running mate. So it's very interesting. But there was a group of, like you say, artists and writers, directors, the Hollywood 10 up there and over there in Hollywood, along with people like you're talking about, Thomas Mann, Bertolt Brecht, Aldous Huxley, who had this, and all the philosophers, socialists, sociologists you just mentioned, that were talking in this way. The people who were the handlers for Marilyn Monroe, Jepson or Greenson, was in that group. Her physician was in that group as well, closely associated with the Hollywood 10. I tend to think of it as, like you say, we need to create both the have and have not. We need to create both the we and the they. And then we'll split, divide and conquer the population. You'll have to come down one side or the other, and then we'll capture whatever you say, sort of like Ivan Ranklin doing the live SWATs. If you're in, he's trying to get you to say something horrible and violent. He sat behind Fauci yesterday and muttered a lot of things. And that's what you're seeing. That's what you're being presented. And you're being asked to respond in social media to be recorded.
Right, exactly. So let me see. Carol said at Rand, I most love the atomic blast sculpture. Yeah, you know, is it still there? Because I know that there's a woman that I worked with at News Corps who was doing a story. Her name was Lisa Napoli. And Lisa Napoli, I hadn't heard from her in 20 years, and she called me up a couple of years ago because she was doing a story on that atomic blast sculpture. George, do you know if it's still there?
I don't go on Rand property.
No. It's okay. So across the street from Rand is the city hall for the city of Santa Monica. On the lawn of the city hall is an atomic cloud that is built out of an anchor chain of a ship, and it might have been an anchor chain of a ship that was taken out of the Bikini Atoll or something. I don't know.
Okay, that's what I made my film there today, on the lawn of this courthouse, and there was a metal sculpture.
Right. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. Anchor chain.
But you see how this has got limited scope. If you just do nuclear exchanges and nuclear war, most people go, well, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, a pole changes, nothing I can do about it. Biological war is different.
Right.
Biological war is ever present. We don't know if the next disease X is, you know, some biological thing to take out our meat so that we eat substitute meat. We don't know, you know.
Here it is.
I did not see that today.
Okay.
I might have missed it.
It's called The Chain Reaction by Paul I guess Paul Conrad might be the guy who took the picture. I'm not sure.
Can you zoom in on 1776 Colorado and from Google Earth and see if it's still there? If I missed that, I really missed.
Maybe. Let me go see. 17. Let me see. Background. Let me make sure it's still there. Installation. The sculpture was surveyed.
I was just there. I doubt I missed it, but I could have.
Okay. Let me see where it is. Conrad Projects. Okay, here's the coordinates. Bingo. Apple Maps. Where is Google Maps? Map. It is right here. So there's the Rand Corporation, George. You're muted.
Yeah, I see right where it is. Can you zoom in on that? I don't think it's still there, but if it is, I missed, because I filmed right under that tree.
Right. Shift. Let me see if I can
zoom in a little. See, the courthouse isn't even there. You know how they flatten government buildings.
Right.
Oh, I see. Yes, it is there. That's the parking lot right next
Yeah.
to it. The courthouse is the next building to the north. Yes.
I do think it looks like it is interesting how from space the Rand Corporation looks like an eye. You know, it's
well, yes, it does it not?
You know, it's even got it's even got the eye over on one side. So this is very much like that Egyptian eye of Horus.
Yeah, the all-seeing eye, the never closing eye.
Well, no, the all-seeing eye has the pupil in the middle. The eye of Horus has it over onto one side. It's actually the eye of Horus.
There got to be a reason for that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's over in the parking lot. I thought it was a tree. So
no, it's a nuclear bomb It's a mushroom cloud, and it is welded together anchor chain. So I don't even know how you do that. Like, I don't even know how you put that together.
I just had a troll tell me that Rand Corporation doesn't do nuclear wargaming. Absolute clarity, just stating it. You are spreading disinformation that they did nuclear wargaming at Rand. I guess we'll have to show them that sculpture.
Right, exactly. Well, the sculptor thought that Rand Corporation was doing it. And again, Herman Kahn wrote, I think, Mutually Assured Destruction when he was at Rand, and then I think he went on and he put up his own shingle at the Hudson Institute.
But Missile Gap, all these things, space race, all these things come out of Rand Corporation. All
right, so here we go. I'm going to look at some comments. And so Hunter Gatherers, who's our friend, one of our moderators, she said, so I'm just going to say linguistically, starting any sentence with so is a tell of something. I'm not going to give a lecture here, but Aaron Milchan was smuggling nuclear stuff with Netanyahu. Is that true?
No, it was John Podesta, and the company was called ARMZ, and the uranium was being diverted from megatons to megawatts of program to various countries that had nuclear ambitions.
Right. And so my problem with a comment like that is that when I put it up on the screen, somebody could screenshot it and then claim that that's what we were saying. And that's
right.
So frame that in the form of a question. Instead of making a statement, is that true? Just ask, is this thing true? All right, here we go.
Now Flynn also did a deal with Kislyak. It was called the Marshall Program for the Middle East. And the guy who ran the original Marshall Plan, Mr. Marshall Plan, was Bissell. So there was some of the Russian uranium that went to very rich Arab nations. And Mike Flynn's the one who sold it to him.
Right.
So maybe they meant that.
Yeah, maybe. Again, let's frame questions as questions. That would be my request. If you want us to answer questions, then you should. So anybody who's making an accusation and then saying, "Is that true?" Those
are summations that they're making for you, so that they could say that you said that. I don't even know who Aaron Milchan is. Who's Aaron Milchan?
I don't know. Again, and this is the thing too. It's like you and I are talking about a specific subject, and then people bring up things that are out of left field. Oh, I saw this thing 3 days ago on YouTube, and I desperately need to talk to Peter and George about it. So it doesn't matter what Peter and George are talking about. We're going to bring it up and ask them the question anyway. It's disorienting for me. But maybe if you want to disorient me, let me see. Okay, Ein Frank says, after reading A.W. Finnegan's book, I'm not concerned about nukes. I'm concerned about who in the global power players is going to double-cross each other first. There's no loyalty among thieves. Yeah, I mean, that's always what it is, right? I mean, LaRouche would tell you it's the Aristotelians versus the Platonists. It's like... other people might tell you it's the Catholics versus the Freemasons. Other people might tell you that it's, this group against that group, and that's the reason that presidents get killed in the street and wars start. They all have banks. I mean, the one thing they all have in common is that they're all getting money from someplace. So whoever the the spoiler alert in my book is, if you want to know who controls the world, find out who are the majority stockholders of the banks, who are the controlling interests of the banks. Not the bankers. Who are the people who the bankers work for?
This is why the military-industrial storytelling, they don't like you saying this is a live exercise, military live exercise, because it takes away the it takes away the have and have not. The vaccinated versus the unvaccinated was the war that they wanted to create, to conquer, right? And when somebody comes out and says it's a military exercise to create a vaccinated versus unvaccinated war, a virus vaccine game, they don't like it, and they will unload on you.
Right, and that's right. Right. So we have critical COVID theory, right, or going on right now, where you've got a bunch of people who I believe are honestly trying to get to the bottom of what's going on, and it winds up having the effect of a circular firing squad, which winds up not benefiting the people who are interested in finding out what the truth is. The truth is something that everybody looking at it can agree on, right? It's not that I was watching. It's funny because we talked about the poles shifting because of something that happens to the core of the Earth, which was ethical skeptic. We talked about the poles shifting from the standpoint of it being a galactic force, which is what Suspicious Observers is saying. And then you've got the geocentrists that are represented by Rick Delano and Wolfgang Smith, who are arguing that the Earth isn't even moving, which George, you can roll your eyes in your head, but if you watch the movie The Principle, and then if you watch The End of Quantum Reality with Wolfgang Smith, I have serious questions now whether or not the Earth is actually moving. So in that case, I don't know about pole shifting theory at all. I don't know if I believe any of that.
Well, I guess I believe in pole shifting theory when you're trying to get the people who are backing Trump to back somebody from the military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
And I believe that's Mike Flynn. Until another substitute comes along, Ramaswamy, nobody wants. RFK, nobody wants, or very few. As far as the Trump supporters, they're not going to go over there. So where are they going to go to Mike Flynn? That's pole shifting. I don't know. I think they're frustrated in the sense that they're not very good at this yet.
Well, it's interesting. I would love to be a fly on the wall right now to they're talking about potentially sentencing Trump to 24 months in prison before the election, and I would love to be a fly on the wall in those boardrooms right now in the decision about whether or not they're actually going to do that, because anybody who thinks that it's up to the judge in the trial is out of their minds.
We said the fix is in a week before it happened because we were looking at the metadata. As soon as you schedule a grave stomping press release, we know that you're not going to schedule the acquittal, right? And where Biden's going to celebrate that. The grave stomping told me that the fix is in. And I think that's what we just have to watch. Just have to watch the metadata. I think it's being floated as a trial balloon to see if people say negative things on social media.
Again, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, they float the trial balloons, but you've got to think that John Roberts is probably over lunch having a meeting with the Supreme Court going, so when do you think we should get involved in this, guys? Because at a certain point, even though Joe Biden is nominated, has a couple of judges in there, I think Trump got it in 3 and Biden got in 2. At a certain point, once you become a Supreme Court judge, you realize that there are key moments in the life of any of the 3 branches of government when the Supreme Court can actually exercise its authority and kind of maintain its ability. One of the things that I was reading the last couple of weeks is that the American Constitution, the three branches of government, it was an attempt by the founders to replicate the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, memory, logos, will, whatever way you want to frame it, as executive, judicial, legislative. And that ultimately what winds up happening in those types of scenarios is that two of the organizations will get together and team up against the third one in order to completely dominate it. And it seems like if John Roberts and the other Supreme Court justices decided that they really wanted to show that the Supreme Court was still a valid and viable thing, they could jump in at any point and kind of undo this just to show that they can.
Yeah, but you can end up getting a pillow to suffocate you too. I mean, the Office of Net Assessment runs the show. You know, they're the ones that are the same directorate of plans that Bissell started. They changed the name because one of the burglars in Watergate was Howard Hunt. So now they changed it to the Office of Net Assessment. But it's one of those similar things, Office of Plans. You know, its plans sound so innocuous. It doesn't sound like overthrowing countries. It's Office of Plans.
Right?
It's Office of Net Assessment.
The Office of Health Alteration.
Health Alteration Committee was another euphemism from, hell.
Right.
And that's how these players work. They're not going to let this be in the control of the three branches of the government.
Right.
They're going to try to convince you it's the three branches of the government. But as soon as we saw the grave stomping press release, we knew immediately the fix.
What's grave stomping? I don't know what that is.
It's when it's Schadenfreude, when you celebrate somebody else's misfortune. He's going to get the guilty plea, so now we're going to dance on the grave.
Right. Mark Palmero, who's a big supporter, said, whose idea was the vax-unvax war? I don't know the answer to the question, but I think that to George's point earlier that we were talking about in the space is that if you think about it the same way that you think about critical race theory, if you call it critical vax theory, okay, then what you're doing is that you're creating a dichotomy or a dialectic between the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. You're turning groups of people, you're tearing families apart because you're taking people who normally have homogeneous relationships with each other and you're tearing them in half by using a cultural influence. So critical vax theory is what we're dealing with. Like, George and J.J. Couey may have difference of opinions about the manifestation of the way that vaccines were perpetrated. They both agree that they were perpetrated, okay? But there is no reason in my world for them to go at each other because that's not how we get to the truth. The way that we get to the truth is that we hear George, we hear J.J. Couey, we look at the evidence, and then we figure it out. Okay, but calling names at each other or taking sides or doing anything like that, that doesn't help. It's not that helpful. So the way that you undo critical X theory, whatever the cultural manifestation of that is to love your brother. Okay, and that's why I keep bringing it back to the epistemology of the Sermon on the Mount. You could take religion out of it. You could take spirituality out of it. But if you love your brother like yourself, then you don't need an army. You don't need a police department. You don't need a lot of that stuff. And we're so far away from that at this point that we don't even know it.
I would agree with that. That's why moderate positions are always usually the smartest positions. And having absolute certainty is usually not ever a great idea. Having some doubt, make allowance for their doubting too, is a good.
That's the best. That's the best line in that poem. Making allowance for their doubting too. The poem is "If" by Rudyard Kipling, and making allowance for doubt. That line in that poem has had more impact on my life than practically anything that I've ever heard or read.
My dad read me that one too, and as far as the no vax or the no bioweapons gain of functions all made up. That's not it could possibly be true. It could be all just the Erasmus Lab was doing that 10 years of stuff and trying to bring back the Spanish flu and then doing all the modifications to make H5N1 jump species and all that stuff. It could be they were working on coronathrax just because they wanted to see if you could aerosolize a bioweapon. Or it could be that Whitney Webb made it all up. And the Sunshine Project before that exposed all that, made it all up. It could be, but we have documents, so why wouldn't we want to look at the documents? That's my point, is why wouldn't we want to look at them?
Right, and then the question that everybody needs to ask is, if NBC's not going to do it, and CBS isn't going to do it, and NPR's not going to do it, then why isn't George Webb and Peter Duke being funded? Why doesn't some billionaire come buy this small apartment building in Pacific Palisades and turn it into the Institute of Citizen Journalism?
I think Elon's driving down now. I don't know exactly where.
You know what? I wouldn't take the money from Elon unless it was in a blind trust, and I could create the values and processes document for the people who would wind up becoming the board of directors of that trust.
I think that you just say how you want it organized. And I think it's going to be.
Do you think the Ford Foundation represents the worldview of Henry Ford?
No, it's been McNamara was Ford, but Ford Foundation was Bissell, I think, for a while. Bissell was Ford Foundation, so those two went at it, right? So, yeah, Rockefeller versus Rockefeller Foundation, they don't always carry their benefactor's water, but with Musk is an interesting character. He wants a carbon tax. He wants to make a multi-planetary species. There's a lot of way out things he says with the robots and
the carbon tax is wacky to me. It's scientism. It's not science. It's scientism.
Yeah. See, I think all these things, the man-human machine mix. What's the electrode in the back of the head?
This is all Malthusian nonsense.
But again, these are they wedge issues. These are
sure.
Have and have not. Do you believe in cyborgs or don't you believe in cyborgs? Do you believe in space or don't you believe in space? But as soon as you go there and say, I want to be a multi-planetary species, immediately we can start categorizing you as as a conspiracy theorist, the wacky space lasers kid,
Well, they're already talking about being a speciest, because if you get your neuroplant chip, you're going to become a superior human being. And so, that's why this transhuman thing, you can't really say anything disparaging about somebody who has decided that they don't want to be a binary human anymore. Well, guess what? You were born a binary human. Okay? Sorry.
Well, he's talking about people with multiple sclerosis or cerebral palsy or some kind of, and this thing will be a breakthrough.
I think that's fantastic for those people. But I don't believe that that's a market. And I know that first and foremost, he's a capitalist. Okay. And that he doesn't spend $1 billion in research and development on things because he can help uplift the lives of a bunch of people who are functionally unemployed and not providing any quote unquote value to the system. Like, that's a cool story, bro. But
I think it comes out of the super soldier program, where transduction is probably not very smart at the muscle because it takes so long for the neural transmission. Neurotransmitters are slow. What if we could make the guy jump with his artificial legs right from his brain? And so I think it's a DARPA super soldier program, and it's being cloaked as I don't know, it's going to be helpful in medicine or whatever, but it's a DARPA super soldier program, I think.
Yeah. Well, we've been going for an hour and 20 minutes here, George. And I see a lot of comments, but I see one question: who did the Thunderbirds? Mark Palmero. I don't know who did the Thunderbirds. I see JBTG73 says the Army Army contract MX791 was signed, creating the RAND Corporation as an official think tank, defining the Project RAND as a continuing program of scientific study and research on the board's broad subject of air warfare with the object of recommending the Air Force preferred methods of techniques and instrumentalities for this purpose. Yeah, this is all out of Annie Jacobson's book.
And if you look at Office of Net Assessment, this is why I say they co-opted the RAND, because it's for all the armed forces, including the Army that has the psychological programs. That's why the Office of Net Assessment is so important. And we know they're involved in the elections. So that's where I tend to focus, not so much on RAND anymore.
Right. And I'll just leave this with Mark Palmero's final comment, which is wake up and find out that you are the eyes of the world. We are the news. And with that...
Well said. Well said.
Well said. With that, I will say that if you want to support the Duke Report, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report. I posted another GPT summary of... there's a 3-hour discussion between Joseph Farrell talking about his first 4 books that I ever wrote when he was a professor of patricity, which is the fathers of the church, educated at Oxford, and he taught at the University of Oklahoma. And he's got some fascinating ideas about the schism between the Eastern and Western Catholic churches that he talks about. But it's a 3-hour video, and I thought nobody's going to listen to this. So I took the transcript, I dropped it into GPT, I built an outline of it. It's brilliant. It's really easy to read. So if you go to buymeacoffee.com/the Duke Report, you can read that. If you want to support this channel, you can go there and you can buy me a coffee, or you can go to thedukereport.com/shop and you can buy a shirt. It's Pride Month. I have a special Pride shirt. It's got all, there's a special Pride shirt on the Duke Report. Just go look for it. And if you want to support George Webb, go to buymeacoffee.com/GeorgeWebb1, no E, or you can go to georgewebb.substack.com and you can subscribe to George's Substack. And George has been prolific lately. He's up to 15 articles now on Laurel Canyon. He's not in Los Angeles sitting around. Obviously, he doesn't have time to shave, and he's too busy. He's too busy writing. I can tell.
Yeah. Well, thanks
and George, if you, George,
all the hospitality.
If you can make it up the highway, George, tonight I'm going to make Wagyu cheeseburgers tonight. So you're invited if you want to come over.
Ooh! I might be up there.
Okay,
Yeah.
Wagyu cheeseburgers. All right.
Ooh, that may have done it. Okay, thanks, Peter.
All right. Live and large. Talk to you later, George. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye-bye.